Book of Job. And we're in chapter 5, working our way towards the end of chapter 5. And we left off in we're going to start tonight in verse 19. But I wanted to go over verse 18 and touch that again because it's a sweet verse and a blessing to know that the Lord doesn't do things just to be contrary or hateful to us or because he's mad at us. He does do that occasionally, that he gets mad at us, but he knows how to deal with that and deal with us in the right way. Look what it says. For he maketh sore, and then what? Bindeth up. Now in the far eastern countries, they would take, if you had a cut or a sore that would come up, they would take and put balm on that sore and then wrap that sore with that balm, and that would soak in and help heal the wound. Now remember, that's exactly how the Good Samaritan fixed up that man that had been robbed and left for dead in the ditch. He took and bound up his wounds and took him to an inn, and there he said he would pay for any expenses other than his lodging there. He would pay for his expenses as well. So he wrapped his wounds with a balm, some type of anointing oil, and then he would be healed. But so there's one example, and then it gives you this. He woundeth, and his hands make whole. All right? He woundeth, and his hands make whole. And what does the doctor do to you when he gets hold of you? And you have to have surgery. Normally, if you're having surgery, what's going to happen? He's going to get his pocket knife out and start whittling on you, right? Well, he's going to wound you. He's going to open you up and wound you, and then he's going to go in and fix the problem, whatever that problem may be. Could be anything. And then he's going to bind up that wound. He's going to heal that wound, and he's going to make it whole again. In other words, that's exactly what a doctor does. But we have the great physician. Our Lord Jesus Christ is also called the great physician. He is able to heal us. He's able to wound us, correct us, trim us up, however you like to put it in your mind, and then he's able to make it all better. All right? Like a little youngin that gets whooped. What do they usually do? They cry a while, and then what happens? Right, they're going to want some comforting. And that's exactly what God does, as he will comfort us after he has taken care of business. And we don't like that business, but 9 out of 10 times we deserve that business. But Job, now remember, he didn't deserve this business, but he was doing this business because God willed it to happen, allowed it to happen, and is directing it. Remember, he allowed the devil to do this, but the devil was again forbidden to do what? What was the devil forbidden to do? Right, take his life or kill him. Now, he didn't say nothing about his sons or daughters, did he? So he was allowed to kill them. All of them. And then he lost all of his servants except for the 3 that came back with the reports. Those were left deliberate, I believe, by the devil to like drive another nail in him. And then his wife comes and gives him says, well, why don't you just curse God and die? And now here are his 4 best friends. And they're pointing fingers at him, and this is Eliphaz speaking, so he's making insinuation here. But he's also delivering some great truths in his chapter, and you can use these great truths when you're in the valley, when you're going through afflictions. Look at some of these great truths in this chapter. No matter how bad Eliphaz is applying them, they're still truth. Okay? No matter how misapplying them he's doing, no matter how much, they're still truth. Why? Because God is the author of truth. God is always the source of truth. All truth in this universe comes from God. Right? So here we see verse 18. Now tonight, verse 19 will start. It says, he shall deliver thee. And notice how he puts it. How? In 6 troubles. All right, now what do you reckon? He says 6 troubles. No guesses? Well, remember how the Lord answered Peter. Remember, Peter says, well, Lord, how many times should I forgive my brother? 7 times? And they thought that was a lot, that 7. But what did the Lord respond with? 70 times 7. In other words, the idea here is that these troubles are kind of pictured as having a number being innumerable. In other words, you don't know how many he's going to have. They could be innumerable, but the idea here is that the first part of the verse, he will what? Deliver you. All right? So when you're going through the valley of affliction and troubles and trials, remember, if God is dispensing these and allowing these to happen, then he's going to also take care of business at the end and restore you. All right? Look, he says, he shall deliver thee in 6 troubles. And I like that. Underline that, deliver, because that's more important than the troubles. Right? God will deliver you from the troubles. Not that you're not going to go through them. Not that you're not going to face adversity. But rather, he is going to have compassion on you when it has run its course. Remember, providentially speaking, God is allowing things to happen to you to do what to you? Clean you up, sanctify you, make you more like his Son. All right? Make you more like Jesus. And while he's doing that, it's not pleasurable, but it is necessary. And because it's necessary, God will put on you what he has in store for you, but he will also put an end to it and make an end to it. And that's what it says in the next verse. It says, yea, 7, there shall no evil touch thee. All right? Remember, the number 7 in the Bible represents what? Huh? Completion or perfection. All right? So what he's saying here is that there is a deliverance coming. There are trials and tribulations and afflictions. There are all those things that happen to God's people. And Jesus warned us. He said, we're going to have troubles and trials. We're going to have hate expressed to us in many different ways. And we're going to face all those adversities. And all those adversities come, but God will always deliver us up out of those troubles. So these two are interesting how they use the numbers. Number 6 is the number of man, isn't it? So what can man expect? What can a Christian man or woman expect? Trouble. Okay? With a capital T. It's coming. But how we act in our troubles, like Job, if we're acting like Job in our troubles and doing what's right, God will bring us through, deliver us, and aid us. And we'll see that at the end of Job, how he does that. But for right now, we know that God will deliver us out of all those troubles and afflictions. It says he's not going to cancel them, but he will give unto us that which we have need of. Remember, there's another one that says that he would not put more on us than we can bear. All right, remember that? He'll not put more on us than we can bear. Well, what does that mean? He tries us to help us to be strengthened. Now, when you have a muscle, if you don't use that muscle, what happens to it? It gets atrophy and weak. So what God does is help us to use those muscles of faith. He helps us to use those so that they will become stronger and not weak. He wants us to be strong and be courageous and to go through the troubles and trials of this life so that when we face the adversities, we're stronger for it. It's not designed to make us weak or cut us down. It's designed to make us stronger and more reliant upon God and trust in him for deliverance from these afflictions. All right? Now look at verse 20. In famine he shall what? Redeem thee from death. Now go back in your Bible and remember Abraham said, Isaac and Jacob, there was a famine in Egypt. And they went and were provided for by God. Same thing happened when Israel went down to Egypt. Remember, they lived there for a long time, and then God sent Joseph the dreams about the famine that was coming, the fruitfulness and the famine that would come, and that Joseph was given that dream in order to prepare Egypt to receive his people and to support his people and to help them to live through that famine. Now, if you stop and think about the old days, what was one of the biggest things that you faced almost every day? Hunger. Hunger. Because you had to work by the sweat of your brow. You had to plow and you had to plant. You had to do all those things, work hard just to get a loaf of bread. And that's the idea. It says, in famine he shall redeem thee from death. Now look at the next phrase. And in war from what? From the power of the sword. So as he delivered and preserved Abraham, remember Abraham was living, and then his nephew and the whole town basically got carried away into captivity by 4 kings. So Abraham takes his servants and a few others and goes and whoops them. Now how did he do that? 4 kings and their armies is a lot of army, isn't it? Yet Abraham and his small group were able to go defeat that enemy and to come back with all of those goods that they had taken, including his nephew and all of their stuff. So Abraham was provided for. Even though he had been attacked, he was still preserved from the sword by God. God brought him through that. Another good one to look at is over in 1 Samuel 17. If you want to make you a little note there, 1 Samuel 17, remember a little shepherd boy named David. A little shepherd boy named David. What's David famous for as a little shepherd boy? Killing Goliath. And remember, he chucked a rock at him with a sling. Remember that? The rock hit him in the forehead. A soft spot that God had made when he was born. It didn't come together there. The plate that's in your brain didn't completely come together. So there was a soft spot there that was directly connected to the brain. And when David slung that, who do you think was guiding that rock? God. And he allowed that rock to be at the perfect angle, the perfect pitch, the perfect speed to hit Goliath right between the eyes and sink into his forehead, which instantly what? Killed him. But remember, what was Goliath shaking at David while he was ranting and raving and talking about how bad it was for him to face this little boy? Oh, huh? Huh? He had a sword and something else. A spear. Great. He had a big shield too, but he had a sword and a spear. And then what happened at the end when David chunked that rock at him and hit him and he fell down dead, what did David do with Goliath's sword? Chopped that boy's head off. And they saved that sword. So I was reading that over in 1 Samuel where that was kept by some priests at a certain synagogue somewhere, and they kept it there, and David got it back from them and began to use it when he was out and about running from Saul. So God delivered David from the sword of Goliath and defeated that giant. God can defeat the giants in your life, the swords that you face in your life, and turn that around for you. But here's another sharp sword. Look at verse 21. Eliphaz should put his name on this one. Look what it says. Thou shalt be hid from the what? Look how he describes the tongue. The scourge of the tongue. Now what's a scourge? Yep. A scourge is a whip. An idea of, remember, on the crucifixion, Jesus was scourged. He was whipped with a Roman whip, which would be a cat of nine tails that was dipped in bone and glass, or metal if they had it. They would dip it in that with the glue, and it would stick to that leather, and then when they hit you, what would it do to you? It would cut coming and going, wouldn't it? Going in, and then he would jerk that whip back, and it would snag the flesh and pull the flesh as it came back. Very painful. You stop and think about it. Well, it says here that you shall be hid from the scourge of the tongue. How powerful the tongue is in just little things. How powerful the tongue is. You think about that. Remember Jeremiah, over where we're at in chapter 18. We're in chapter 19. But in chapter 18, remember they had gotten together and formed a council and said, we're not going to listen to Jeremiah. As a matter of fact, we're going to talk bad about him. We're going to gossip about him. We're going to down him. We're going to slander him. We're going to defame him. And that was their tongues, scourging him with the tongues. So the thing about that is that God will protect his people and make either their tongues of no avail or seem so ridiculous that it's not given any credit or worth, or that God protects us from those calamities of the scourging tongue. Now you think about it, what is another name for the devil besides deceiver? Liar. There's another one. Accuser. Okay? He's an accuser of the brethren. What do we mean by that? Well, God will stand and accuse you of all kinds of stuff. Whether you're saved or not, he's still going to accuse you. Scourge you with the tongue. And boy, those things hurt. When he gets into your tater patch and start picking up a few taters, you say, ow! What's going on here? The devil is trying to scourge you with his tongue. So no doubt the devil was whispering on Job's shoulder there, like a little old parrot, like a pirate's parrot, and whispering in his ear saying, you've sinned, Job. See, all your friends agree with me, you've sinned. And I don't doubt that was playing heavy on Job's mind, but Job knew. Job knew that he was right, that he had not sinned. And we know that from the beginning of the first two chapters. Job did not sin. And he had not sinned as of yet, but he also knows that God can deliver him, even though he suffers from the afflictions of the devil and the afflictions of his brothers here, or his friends. He's suffering from them, yet we see here that God can still deliver and does deliver Job at the end. As a matter of fact, them four friends come real close to doing what? What happens at the end? What do those four friends end up being? Real close to what? God's wrath. Now, you know how God can execute somebody like that. It's not hard for him to send fire down from heaven and burn them up. Or it's not hard for him to send an army over and destroy them that way. Well, God could have slain them instantly. Could have. And he said, Job, if you pray for them, then I'll forgive them. And what did Job do? He prayed for them. And he had compassion on them, even though they go through all 30, 40 chapters accusing him of being sinful and wicked. He still prays for them and loves them enough to go ahead and seek God's forgiveness for them. Intercedes for them. Right? So that's a picture of intercession. And that's how God can save us from destruction. Now look at this. Verse 22, it says, at destruction and famine thou shalt laugh, neither shalt thou be afraid of the beasts of the earth. All right? Have you ever gone through a storm and you're leaning on God and trusting in God in that storm? Whether it's a physical storm that we come through the mountains, like sometimes a tornado will get in the mountains and run the river and cause all kinds of damage, like the hurricane winds that came through and knocked trees down, power lines down. those kind of storms seem like that it's going to take care of everything. I mean, just wipe everything out. But this says, at destruction and famine thou shalt laugh, because the saints consider themselves safe in the arms of God. They can laugh at the fierce winds and storms of life and know that God has them in safety. Habakkuk, you can write these two verses down, Habakkuk 3:17 and Habakkuk 1:10. Habakkuk 1:10. Habakkuk 1:10 says, a man thinks himself secure and so is cheerful and pleasant amidst all the noise that is about him. Okay? In other words, Habakkuk went through it because he was one of those minor prophets. He wasn't even famous like the other ones, like Isaiah and Jeremiah and Daniel and all those other heavy prophets. He was just one of those little fellers that loved the Lord and was willing to speak for the Lord. And he said he's happy and cheerful when there's all kinds of noise about him. He's still cheerful because he's trusting in God to see him through those calamities. So think about that. The next time destruction and famine and wars and all those kind of things are upon us, remember to be looking to the Lord for solace, comfort. Remember to look into the Lord as a fortress and a shield. Looking to the Lord in our tower that he has placed us in safety, and trust in the Lord to take care of us. Even if the tower falls down around us, God will take care of us and bring us through. No matter how difficult it is, God can bring us through. And that's a good lesson for Job to learn, no matter how difficult the trials that he's going through. And they're tough. I mean, he had the toughest of all that I've known. And he's going through those trials, yet he comes through. And he could trust that God will bring him through. And God does bring him through, doesn't he, at the end? So think about that, and think about how you would act and how you should act in the times of strife and afflictions, troubles, war, famine, all those different kind of judgments that happen to the earth. Sometimes we get overcome with the judgments that are coming because of the storms, like God may be using a storm to get somebody's attention. Well, sometimes we get in the middle of that, but God watches over us, keeps us safe. So think about that this week, and we'll take up with verse 23 next time. I'm going to go all the way down, Lord willing, down through verse 27 and finish chapter 5 up. And then we see Job come back to the plate and get ready to hit one out of the park. So remember, he gets his shot after Eliphaz finishes up these 2 chapters, and now it's his turn. So Job does 2 chapters. And then you'll see the next one come on. I think it's Bildad. Let me look. I've got it wrote down here. Yeah. The number 2 man, Bildad, takes his shot at Job. And then Job gives him 2 chapters worth. So it's interesting. Job's prepared. He knows. He's got wisdom. God's given him wisdom and righteousness. And he knows how to respond to these false accusations. He's just trying to get them to get in the right mindset, get right with God, and stop accusing him and start helping him. And that's what he intends to do. Even though it might seem hard in some places, he might seem like he's give up in some places, his whole goal is to help them to help him to be whole. And that's something you think about. You're in the afflicted part, and they're supposed to be helping you. So you got to help them. That just adds to your burden and your troubles and trials. So he's got it from all corners, doesn't he? But he comes through. And that shows you the possibility that God will help us. It shows us the probability that he will help us. And it shows us the assurance that we can know God will help us. If we're living for him like Job, living right and doing right, then God will help us through any and all trials that come. So think about that this evening. All right, we'll stop there.